This episode has some of the most beautiful and touching words I've ever heard from St. John Bosco because he was describing the oratory boys' paths to heaven. He really could see their future and which paths would lead them to their eternal goal. This is part 2 of Don Bosco's dream of battle, and if you'd like to see part 1, just click on the link above me here. The Miracles and Prophecies of St. John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. I blew the trumpet once more, and we heard the words, "Truce for the vanquished." The sky brightened, and a rainbow became visible. It was so lovely and so colorful that I can't describe it. It was immense, as though one end rested on top of Superga, and its arch stretched and stretched until it reached the top of Moncenisio. I should also add that all the boys who had been victorious wore crowns so brilliant and so bright and varied in color that it was an awe-inspiring sight. Their faces, too, were resplendently handsome. At the far end of the valley, on one side, under the center of the rainbow, there was a sort of balcony holding people full of joy and of such varied beauty as to surpass my imagination. A very noble lady, royally arrayed, came to the railing of this balcony and called out, "Come, my children, and take shelter under my mantle." As she spoke, an immense mantle spread out, and all the boys ran to take cover under it. Some actually flew. These had the word innocence on their forehead. Others just walked, and some crawled. I also started to run, and in that split second, it couldn't have been more than that, I said to myself, this had better end or we'll die. I had just said this and was still running when I woke up. For reasons later explained, he returned to this subject on May 6th, the feast of the Ascension. He had the students and the artisans assembled together for night prayers, and then spoke as follows. "The other night I wasn't able to say everything because we had visitors in our midst. These things must be kept among us, and no one should write to friends or relatives about them. I confide everything in you, even my sins. That valley, that land of trial, is this world. The semi-darkness is the place of perdition. The 2 hills are the commandments of God and the church. The serpents are the devils. The monsters, evil temptations. The horse, I think, is the same as the one that struck Heliodorus and represents our trust in God. The boys who walked over the roses and fell dead are those who give in to this world's pleasures that deal death to the soul. Those who trampled the roses underfoot are those who spurn worldly pleasures and are therefore victorious. The boys who flew under the mantle are those who have preserved their baptismal innocence. For the sake of those who might wish to know, little by little I shall tell those concerned the kind of weapon they carried, and whether they were victorious or not, dead or wounded. I did not know all the boys, but I recognized those of the oratory, and if the others were ever to come here, I would recognize them immediately the moment I saw them. Father Bello, his secretary, who took down this dream, wrote that he could not remember many things that Don Bosco narrated and explained at length. The next morning, May 7th, when he was with Don Bosco, he asked him, "How can you possibly remember all the boys you saw in your dream, and tell each one the state he was in, and pinpoint his faults?" "Oh," Don Bosco answered, "by means of otis boris pietutis." This was a meaningless nonsense phrase that he often used to evade embarrassing questions. When Father Barberis also broached the same subject, Don Bosco answered gravely, "It was a great deal more than a dream," and cutting the talk short, he passed on to other things. Father Berto ends his report with these words, "I, too, the writer of this report, asked him about my part in this dream. His answer was so much to the point that I burst into tears and said an angel from heaven could not have hit the truth better." Once again, this dream was the theme of another good night talk on June 4th. But before we hear Don Bosco's incredible explanation of this dream, I'd just like to say that if you'd like to enroll in our Saturday Mass intentions for the promoters of St. John Bosco, just click on the link in the description below. Or you can wait till the end of the video and click on the logo that should appear on the screen. The community was present at this dialogue between Father Barberis and Don Bosco. Father Barberis began, "With your permission, Don Bosco, this evening I would like to ask a few questions. I didn't dare to these last few evenings because we had visitors. I'd just like some clarification on your last dream." "Go ahead," replied Don Bosco in his customary relaxed manner. "It's some time since I last mentioned it, but it doesn't matter. Now you said at the end of your dream that some flew to Mary's mantle, some ran, others walked slowly, and a few sloshed through mud, were bespattered with it, and were hardly able to take cover under the mantle. You already told us that those who flew were the pure. We can easily understand those who ran, but what is meant by those who got stuck in the mud?" Don Bosco answered, "Those who got stuck in the mud, and who, for the most part, couldn't reach Our Lady's mantle, symbolize those attached to the things of this world. Being selfish, they think only of themselves, and because of this, they bespatter themselves with mud, and are no longer able to get off the ground and aspire to the things of heaven. They see the Blessed Virgin calling to them and would like to go to her. They take a few steps, but mud holds them down. It always happens like that. The Lord says, 'Where thy treasure is, there also will your heart be.' Those who do not raise themselves up to the treasures of grace set their hearts on the things of this world. Pleasures, riches, success in business, vainglory are all they think of. Heaven is just ignored. Now there's something else you didn't tell us about, Don Bosco. You mentioned it to some privately, and I wish you would let us know too. It's this. Someone asked you whether he was among those who ran or those who walked slowly, and if he had taken cover under the mantle of Mary, and if the handle of his pitchfork was worm-eaten or broken. You replied that you had been unable to see clearly because there was a cloud between you and him. Don Bosco replied, "You're a theologian, and you should know that. Anyway, there were indeed some boys, though not very many, whom I could not see clearly. I saw each of them well enough to recognize them, but that was about all. Those are the boys who are tight-lipped with their superiors. They don't open their hearts to them. They're not sincere. Whenever they see a superior coming their way, rather than meet him, they go off in the opposite direction. Some of them came to ask me in what state I had seen them in the dream, but what could I tell them? I could have said, 'You have no confidence in your superiors. You never open your heart to them.' Now all of you remember this. There is nothing that can be of greater help to you than opening your hearts to your superiors, having great trust in them, and being utterly sincere." Father Barberis hesitated. "There's something else I'd like to ask, but I'm afraid you might say I'm too curious." Don Bosco replied good-naturedly, "Isn't that fairly well known anyway?" There was general laughter at that. "Yet, you know, there is a certain kind of curiosity which is healthy. As for example, when a boy, anxious to learn, keeps asking questions about serious things from persons who might know. There are others instead who just stand around like fools. They never have any questions to ask. This is not a good reflection on them." So then Father Barberis continued with his question. "Well, I won't be like that. For a long time I have wanted to ask you this question about the dream. Did you see only each boy's past, or did you also see his future, that is, his vocation and his possible success?" Don Bosco replied, "I saw more than the past. I also saw the future that was to be theirs. Each boy had several paths stretching out ahead of him. Some were narrow and thorny. Others were strewn with sharp nails. But God's blessings had also been strewn on these paths. All these paths led to a garden of rare beauty, filled with every delight." Father Barberis asked, "Then this means that you can tell which path each one should take? That is, you know the vocation of each one of us, how we shall end up, and which path we shall follow?" "No," Don Bosco answered. "It wouldn't be wise to tell each one which path he will follow or how he will end up. No good will result from telling a boy, 'You will take the path of wickedness.' this would only frighten him. Now, what I can say is this: if one follows a certain path, he may be sure that he's on the road to heaven, on the road, namely, to which he has been called. And if one doesn't follow that road, he will not be on the right path. Some roads are narrow, uneven, and strewn with thorns. Yet take heart, my dear children. With the thorns, there is also the grace of God, and so much happiness is in store for us at the end of our journey that we shall soon forget all our pain. Honestly, I would like all of you to remember this. This was a dream, and no one is obliged to believe it. However, I have noticed that those who have asked me for my explanations have accepted my suggestions in good part. Nevertheless, do as St. Paul says, probate spiritus et quod bonum est tenete. Test all things, hold fast that which is good. Another thing that I would never want you to forget is to pray for your poor Don Bosco, lest the words of St. Paul, after preaching to others, I myself should be rejected, may apply to me. That is, after preaching to you, I may end up with the damned. I'm doing my best to warn you. I worry about you and give you advice, but I fear I may be acting like a brooding hen that hunts for crickets, worms, seeds, and other food for her chicks, while she herself may die of hunger, unless she gets some good nourishment. Therefore, I pray to God for me that this may not happen, but that instead I may adorn my heart with many virtues and be pleasing to God, so that one day all of us may go to heaven to enjoy Him and glorify Him. Good night. Thank you all so much for watching. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you.